There's a kind of silence that doesn't come from peace. It comes from absence. And when that absence wears the name of someone you love, it doesn't feel quiet. It feels deafening. It's the kind of silence that echoes louder at night, when the phone doesn't ring, when the message doesn't come, when the space he used to fill becomes a reminder that maybe you were never fully seen. Sometimes what hurts most isn't what was said, but what wasn't. It's the unanswered questions, the vanishing warmth, the way he once looked at you like you were the center of the room, and then stopped looking altogether. You felt that, didn't you? That shift, that cold wind of detachment dressed as indifference. And maybe you wondered, what did I do wrong? Why does he act like I don't exist anymore? Louise Hay once wrote, "We are responsible for every experience in our lives." And those words are not a blame. They are an invitation. Not to take responsibility for his silence, but to take responsibility for how you stop seeing yourself when someone else stops looking. To ask yourself, when did I start needing his attention to believe I mattered? The woman who tolerates being ignored usually carries something older than that man's absence. A wound that whispers, "You are disposable. You are too much. You are not enough." And so she stays. She stays hoping to be noticed, hoping to be chosen. But underneath all that hoping, she's afraid. Afraid that being forgotten confirms a fear she already had. That maybe love, for her, always slips away. Lise Bourbeau, in her teachings on the wound of rejection, explains how early emotional pain can shape the way we relate to love, creating a hunger not just to be loved, but to be proved worthy. That kind of hunger makes us stay longer than we should. It makes us chase silence, trying to turn it into sound. Trying to win back someone who's already turned his back. But what if the real lesson wasn't about getting him to speak? What if it was about hearing yourself again, feeling yourself again, seeing yourself, not through his eyes but through your own? Because here's the truth. The greatest weakness of a man who ignores you isn't his silence. It's that he never learned how to stay present with a woman who knows her worth. And when you remember yours, something sacred happens. His distance stops being a wound. It becomes a mirror, showing you just how far you've come from needing to be needed. This video isn't about him. It's about you. It's about reclaiming the parts of you that got lost in the waiting. It's about transforming the silence into space. Space where you return to yourself. Fully, finally, fiercely. And the most powerful thing you can do now is choose yourself in the exact place where you once begged to be chosen. There's a moment, subtle, almost invisible, when love begins to shift into something else. You sense it not through words, but through absence. The way his replies slow down, the way his gaze no longer lingers, the way the warmth fades without a fight. And instead of honoring your own ache, you begin to compensate. You start speaking louder in hopes he'll hear you. You give more, hoping he'll remember what you're worth. You silence your own needs so his comfort won't be disturbed. You learned that love means effort. So when his silence comes, your first instinct is to try harder, to fix, to please, to earn again what once felt natural. But here's the wound beneath the effort. A belief that being loved requires performance, that your presence alone isn't enough, that his withdrawal is somehow your fault, and that if you just love better, quieter, more patiently, maybe he'll come back. But this pattern is not love. It's emotional survival dressed as devotion. And while you chase after his silence, something inside you begins to disappear. The woman you once were, intuitive, radiant, self-trusting, starts shrinking. Every unanswered message becomes a mirror of your fear. Every distant look reinforces the lie that you are easy to leave. And yet, the more you chase, the more he pulls away. Not because you are unworthy, but because desperation feeds a dynamic where power replaces intimacy, and real love cannot breathe in that space. So the chase continues, not just after him, but after the version of yourself you were before you started settling for crumbs, before you equated his silence with your shame, before your worth depended on whether or not he looked your way. But what if there's a different way? What if love isn't something you chase, but something you remember? What if silence isn't an invitation to run after someone else, but to walk back to yourself? Now, let's explore what that silence really means. Because what appears as strength in him might be something entirely different. Sometimes what looks like power is just fear wearing a mask. When a man pulls away, when he stops responding, when his presence fades into a vague outline of what it once was, it's tempting to believe he's in control. that his silence is calculated, that his detachment is a sign of emotional superiority. But often, that silence isn't a demonstration of strength. It's a hiding place. A man who disappears emotionally may not be punishing you. He may be protecting himself from something he never learned to hold: vulnerability, intimacy, emotional depth. To truly love a woman, to stay present with her feelings, to witness her pain without running, that requires more courage than silence ever will. And not every man has met that courage within himself yet. So he does what feels safer. He retreats. He goes quiet. He pretends not to feel. But you, who feels everything, are left carrying the weight of both your emotions and his absence. And in that space, it's easy to confuse his withdrawal with your unworthiness. But they are not the same. One is about his inability to face something within. The other is about your longing to be loved with presence. Louise Hay taught us that what we see in others is often a reflection of what we need to heal in ourselves. When you see his silence, what rises in you? The ache to be seen, the fear of abandonment, the question of whether you're too much or not enough. These emotions are not punishments. They are invitations. Not to chase him, but to meet yourself more honestly. Silence isn't always a strategy. Sometimes it's a symptom of emotional numbness, of internal chaos, of patterns learned from generations of men who were never taught how to stay. And while it may seem like he holds the power, remember this: the one who dares to feel, to stay, to speak even when it's hard, that is the one who is truly strong. There's a kind of power that doesn't come from having the last word. It comes from being willing to stand in your truth, even when the other person retreats into silence. But what happens when you stop reacting to that silence? When you stop explaining yourself, defending yourself, chasing clarity from someone who hides from his own emotions? Let's explore the invisible power that begins to grow in that quiet space. There is a sacred kind of silence that doesn't come from avoidance. It comes from self-possession. And when a woman enters this space, something profound begins to shift. Because not reacting is not the same as not feeling. Choosing not to chase, not to explain, not to beg for clarity, that is not weakness. It is wisdom. It is presence. It is power. The world has taught you that if you don't respond, you'll lose him. That if you don't keep trying, you'll be forgotten. That your silence is a risk. But the deeper truth is this: when your silence is grounded in self-respect, it speaks louder than any message you could ever send. When you no longer react to his emotional absence, you create a mirror that reflects back his own discomfort, his own confusion, his own inability to stay connected. And this mirror can be confronting, not because you've become cold, but because you've become clear. In that quiet space, he may feel something he's never had to face before. Not your anger, not your need, but your dignity. And for many men, that's the most disruptive energy of all. A woman who is centered, calm, and no longer trying to prove her worth. This kind of silence isn't passive. It's active. It holds a boundary. It protects your inner world. It stops the cycle of emotional overgiving. And most of all, it honors the truth that your love is not a reward to be earned after someone disappears. Your love is sacred, and it requires presence. There is a bond, invisible and energetic, that gets strengthened when you stop performing, when you stop running after someone who stands still, when you allow the silence to speak for you, without turning it into punishment, but into a kind of prayer, a prayer that says, "I will not betray myself to be seen." And while it may seem like nothing is happening, trust this: your stillness is a language, and he hears it, even if he doesn't answer, even if he doesn't change, even if he never returns. Because your power isn't in pulling him back. It's in no longer abandoning yourself to reach for someone who isn't reaching back. Now, imagine what becomes possible when you stop trying to fix him and begin, finally, to heal yourself. There comes a moment when the ache of trying to make someone love you becomes louder than their absence, when the exhaustion of holding the relationship alone weighs heavier than the fear of letting go. And in that moment, something inside you whispers a truth you've been avoiding. You were never meant to fix him. Louise Hay reminds us, we are not helpless victims of circumstances. We can change our thoughts and create a new reality. Yet so many women carry this invisible belief that if they love deeply enough, sacrifice quietly enough, tolerate patiently enough, they can repair what is broken in him. But that is not love. That is self-abandonment in the name of hope. You were not born to be a healer of men who refuse to look at their own wounds. You were not born to be a mirror for someone who closes his eyes to his own reflection. You are not here to prove that love can save someone who hasn't chosen to be saved. What you are here to do is heal, not him, you. To trace the roots of why his distance hurts so much. To ask yourself, why does silence feel like rejection? Why do I equate his emotional absence with my unworthiness? Because behind every attempt to fix someone is a hidden ache, a part of you that still believes love must be earned, that you must perform to deserve connection, that if you don't keep him close, you'll lose your sense of self. But you haven't lost yourself. You've just forgotten who you were before you started giving everything away. And healing is not about becoming someone new. It's about remembering that you are already whole. You can't teach someone how to love. You can only love yourself so fully, so fiercely, that anything less becomes unrecognizable. When you begin to heal, your energy changes. Your boundaries sharpen. Your voice softens, not from suppression, but from clarity. And suddenly, his silence is no longer a question you obsess over. It becomes a response you no longer need. So instead of trying to fix him, come home to yourself, to your body, to your breath, to your truth. Let that be the love story that finally makes you whole. Because the shift that truly changes everything begins within. Now let's explore what happens when your energy moves from desperation to dignity. Something begins to change, not outside, but inside, when you stop chasing what hurts. There's a quiet revolution that takes place in your energy when you move from needing to be chosen to choosing yourself. This shift isn't loud. It's not dramatic. It's often invisible to the world, but undeniable to the soul. Desperation has a frequency. It clings. It reaches. It contracts around fear. And when a woman lives in that space, even without words, it's felt. It's felt in the tone of her voice, in the way she waits by the phone, in the way she loses sleep, wondering why she wasn't enough. But when dignity enters the room, when she decides to stop explaining, stop proving, stop begging for what should be offered freely, the entire atmosphere changes. Louise Hay believed that our thoughts shape our lives. And when your inner dialogue changes from, "Why doesn't he see me?" to "Why have I been ignoring myself?" your outer world begins to reflect that shift. Because dignity doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't plead. It doesn't wait to be validated. Dignity stands. This doesn't mean you stop loving. It means you stop shrinking. It means you stop tying your joy to someone else's emotional maturity. It means you stop confusing your openness with obligation. When you move into dignity, even your silence feels different. It no longer carries the weight of punishment or withdrawal. It becomes a sanctuary, a space where you meet yourself with tenderness, where you honor what you've survived and what you will no longer tolerate. And yes, he feels it, even if he never says a word. He feels the shift, because energy never lies. When you rise, even quietly, it's noticed. Not because you demanded attention, but because you became undeniable. You begin to radiate something that no longer needs to be chased, something that magnetizes, something that says, "I am here, I am whole, I will not lose myself again." And while he may still be silent, the real sound is within you now, the voice that says, "I am done betraying myself for love that disappears when I need it most." Let's now look deeper into what his silence reveals. Not about you, but about the emotional blocks he carries. At first, his silence might have seemed powerful, as if his distance held control, as if his absence was a message you needed to decipher. But with time and presence, you begin to see differently. His withdrawal wasn't strength. It was a shield protecting him from the emotional intimacy he wasn't ready to hold. The truth is, emotional detachment isn't always intentional. Often, it's inherited, passed down from fathers who never expressed affection, from cultures that told men vulnerability was weakness. And so he learned to disconnect, not because he doesn't care, but because he doesn't know how to stay when emotions become real. His pride, his silence, his refusal to engage. These are not signs of someone grounded. They are signs of someone avoiding. And while that may protect him from his own discomfort, it leaves you drowning in yours. You might think, if I had done something differently, maybe he would have stayed present. But that thought is a trap, because what you're witnessing is not a reaction to your flaws. It's a reflection of his own emotional limitations. Louise Hay often said that we cannot give what we don't have, and a man who hasn't met his own grief, his own shame, his own longing, cannot meet yours, no matter how patient, loving, or understanding you are. The hardest part? realizing that you cannot inspire someone into emotional maturity. You cannot be soft enough to melt someone's defenses if they're not ready to feel. You cannot carry both hearts in a relationship. You can only carry yours. And in that realization, there's grief, but also freedom, because you stop trying to decode his silence. You stop personalizing his detachment. You start seeing the gap not as a judgment of your worth, but as a sign of where he is emotionally. And the real power lies in choosing to no longer shrink just to bridge that gap. Now let's walk into a moment of transformation. The story of a woman who turned her silence into something unforgettable. She used to wait for the message, wait for the change in his eyes, wait for him to notice the way she was holding everything together, even as she unraveled in silence. Every time he drifted away, she folded herself smaller, thinking maybe that would keep him close. She apologized for things she didn't do. She gave more, stayed longer, hoped harder, and in that slow erosion of her boundaries, she disappeared. But something shifted, not in him, in her. It didn't happen all at once. It started on a quiet evening, when she looked in the mirror and saw someone she didn't recognize, a woman tired of earning what should have been given freely, a woman who, despite all her giving, still felt alone, a woman who finally asked herself, what if I stop waiting to be chosen? What if I choose me? So she stopped. She stopped chasing, stopped apologizing, stopped shrinking herself to fit the shape of his absence. She didn't become bitter. She didn't shout. She didn't demand closure. She simply turned inward. She began to write again, walk again, pray again. She started to remember the sound of her own voice, the one that used to sing, to speak with certainty, to say yes and no without fear. And when he noticed, it was already too late. He tried to reappear, through a message, a memory, a moment of curiosity. But she had grown. She had expanded into the space he once occupied. And there was no room left for crumbs where she had built a feast of self-love. He saw her. Truly saw her. But only when she no longer needed to be seen by him. That's the irony. When a woman stops begging to be remembered, she becomes unforgettable. Not because she made noise, but because she became silent in a way that was full, not empty, complete, not cold. Her silence was no longer about him. It was about her healing, her return, her awakening. And that, more than any words, left an imprint that could not be erased. Now let's step into the final truth, that your power was never in his return, but in your own awakening. There's a common illusion that healing arrives when the person who hurt you comes back to apologize, as if their regret could restore the parts of you that shattered in the silence. But the truth is far more sacred, far more radical. Healing begins the moment you stop waiting. You don't need his return to reclaim your worth. You don't need his closure to feel complete. You don't need his validation to believe you are lovable. What you need, and what you've always needed, is your own presence, the kind that sees you fully, the kind that holds you through the nights he never called, the kind that whispers, I'm not leaving you again. There is something profound that awakens when a woman finally realizes she was never broken, just misdirected. Her love was never wasted, just misplaced. And her longing wasn't weakness. It was the echo of her own unmet needs. Louise Hay taught that when we truly love ourselves, everything in life works. And that includes love, but not the kind of love that makes you disappear to be accepted. The kind that roots you so deeply in your own being, you no longer confuse silence with rejection. Your power isn't in how many times someone comes back. Your power is in how deeply you return to yourself, in how tenderly you learn to stay, in how bravely you let go of the people who cannot meet you where you are now. And if one day he looks back and wonders what happened, let that be his question, not your wound. Because the woman you're becoming, the one who no longer begs, the one who no longer shrinks, the one who no longer waits, is a woman who cannot be forgotten, not because someone else says so, but because she remembers herself. There's a strength in you that no silence can erase, a depth that no rejection can diminish, a light that no absence can dim. And maybe you forgot it for a while. Maybe you looked into someone else's eyes hoping to be reminded. Maybe his silence made you question your beauty, your worth, your place in this world. But you are not what he failed to see. You are what you choose to reclaim. Louise Hay reminds us, I am deeply fulfilled by all that I do. That fulfillment doesn't come from being chosen. It comes from remembering that you are already enough, that your voice matters even when no one is listening, that your love holds value even when it's not returned. The greatest weakness of a man who ignores a woman like you is not his distance, it's his blindness. The blindness to see that while he was walking away, you were walking inward, that while he was avoiding depth, you were learning to breathe underwater, that while he was trying to forget you, you were finally remembering who you are. Lise Bourbeau teaches that the healing of rejection begins not when the other changes, but when we stop asking them to, when we stop showing up where we're not seen, when we stop proving ourselves to people who cannot hold the weight of our truth. You are not invisible. You are not too much. You are not hard to love. You are sacred. You are softness with roots. You are fire with grace. You are silence that speaks. And just because he couldn't meet you doesn't mean you aren't worth meeting. And maybe the most powerful thing you'll ever do is not scream, not chase, not prove, but simply live. Live in your fullness. Live in your joy. Live in the knowing that his inability to love you is not a reflection of your value. It's a reflection of his unreadiness. You don't have to be loud to be heard. You don't have to be seen to matter. You are like rare perfume. Those who are ready will notice, and those who aren't will never forget that they didn't stay. If this touched your heart, let this space be a sanctuary. Subscribe to the channel and continue walking this journey of emotional freedom and sacred self-worth. And if you feel ready to go deeper, click on the next video on the screen. Your healing doesn't end here. It begins every time you choose yourself again.